The cameras were already rolling. It was a high-profile UN summit in New York, one of the most anticipated in years. Delegates from over 100 nations sat under the glowing ceiling lights, surrounded by flags, microphones, and tension. The room buzzed with hushed chatter, until the silence cracked. Donald Trump walked in. Everyone watched. His suit was perfect, his expression cold. He looked around, then suddenly stopped. Right next to his designated seat was a name tag. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, President of Burkina Faso. Trump froze. He called a UN official over and whispered something. The official nodded, then awkwardly moved the placard. Trump refused to sit, not beside him, not beside the African leader. The cameras caught everything. A few gasps, some whispers, but most stayed quiet. And Traoré? He hadn't even arrived yet. Everyone waited. That empty seat beside Trump was no longer just a seat. It was a statement. The tension was sharp. Everyone could feel it in their bones. But no one could imagine what would happen when Captain Ibrahim finally walked in. And when he did, everything changed. The heavy door opened slowly. A tall man stepped in, head high, eyes calm. Dressed in his signature uniform with African gold embroidery, Captain Ibrahim Traoré walked with a quiet strength that silenced the room. Every camera turned. Trump kept his eyes forward, stiff in his seat. He didn't look up, didn't move. Traoré saw the placard moved. He saw the empty chair. He understood instantly, but he said nothing. He smiled gently at nearby African leaders, nodded respectfully to delegates from Europe, Asia, and Latin America. Then, instead of sitting in the now vacant seat next to Trump, Traoré did something unexpected. He walked past it. He chose to stand at the center of the room, placing both hands on the speaker's desk, without waiting for a turn to speak. Whispers filled the room. What was he doing? The UN moderator rose halfway from his chair, unsure whether to stop him. But Traoré spoke. Calm, measured, powerful. I came here for dialogue, not division. There was silence again, but a different kind. The kind before a storm. Trump crossed his arms, visibly irritated, but it was the next few words from Traoré that would begin to shake the world. Ibrahim looked around the room, slowly, carefully. Each delegate watched him, stunned by his poise. He turned back to Trump, who still refused to meet his eyes. And then he spoke clearly. Mr. Trump, your chair rejected me before your mouth did. But I did not come here to sit. I came here to stand for my people. The room went dead quiet. A translator repeated his words through headsets. Some gasped, some choked back tears. He wasn't angry. He wasn't loud. But every word carried the weight of centuries. Traoré continued. Africa is not asking for a seat at the table. Africa built that table and it was taken from us. Some delegates looked down. Trump adjusted his tie, visibly uncomfortable. Still, Traoré didn't blink. You may refuse to sit next to me, but history cannot refuse to stand beside justice. Suddenly, several leaders began clapping, soft at first, then louder. Even those who had stayed neutral began to nod, some wiping their eyes. The moment was raw, real, powerful, and the world was watching. But Traoré wasn't done. What he did next would bring the entire room to its feet. As the applause slowly faded, Traoré took a quiet breath, but his hands were still shaking. Not out of fear, but from the weight of what he carried. He turned to the room again. I did not come here for comfort. I came here for memory, for dignity. He paused. Do you know the name Thomas Sankara? A few in the room nodded. Others looked confused. He was my hero, Traoré continued. Killed for dreaming of an Africa that stood proud, free from Western chains. The camera panned across the room, some eyes wide, others watering. He once said, "You cannot carry out fundamental change without a certain amount of madness." Traoré's voice cracked just slightly, but he went on. "So call me mad, for believing that we can stand without begging, that we can build without kneeling." The room went quiet again. One African delegate covered her mouth with her hand. Another was already in tears. And Donald Trump, still frozen. But the cracks in his expression had begun to show. Something was shifting, and the world could feel it. Traoré reached into his jacket slowly. Everyone tensed. Security tightened grip on their radios. But he pulled out only a photo, worn, folded at the corners. He held it up. "This is my mother. Her name was Aissata." He looked at the picture gently, then raised his eyes to the room. "She carried water on her head while holding me in one arm. She worked in the fields under the sun, while men sat in air-conditioned rooms writing policies that destroyed our soil. You could hear someone sniffling in the audience. But she never begged, she never stole, and she never gave up." His hand shook slightly as he returned the photo to his jacket. "When I stand here, I carry her strength, her struggle, her love." The camera caught one delegate wiping tears discreetly. "You think I care about a chair?" Traoré asked, turning to Trump. "I was raised by a woman who stood her whole life and still fed me with pride." Silence. Then something happened no one expected. Even Trump turned his head, just slightly. The photo had done something. It had cracked the shield of indifference. But what Traoré did next would crush it completely. Traoré finally stepped down from the speaker's podium. He walked slowly toward the chair that Trump had rejected. He looked at it, not with anger, but with sadness. And then, in front of the entire United Nations, he pulled the chair away. Everyone watched. He placed it against the wall, and then he walked back and stood in the empty space. "Let this chair be a reminder," he said, voice calm, but trembling. "Of all the seats we were never offered." Gasps filled the air. A powerful silence fell. The symbolic act hit harder than any speech could. A Nigerian delegate stood, then one from Brazil, then South Africa, then Haiti. One by one, people began rising from their seats, and then they clapped. Loud, long. Even some who didn't fully agree with Traoré's politics felt something shift inside them. Not everyone was ready to stand, but no one could sit the same again. And Trump? He sat in silence, lips pressed tight, as the room shook with applause. The moment went viral in real time. But what happened after this would burn into history forever. As the applause settled, Traoré reached into his folder once more. This time it wasn't a speech, it wasn't numbers, it was a letter. He unfolded it gently, paper worn and stained. This letter was written by a 14-year-old girl from Burkina Faso. Her name is Aminata. She wrote it 2 months ago. She died last week. The room fell still. She died carrying water on foot, because her village still has no well. Traoré's voice shook, but he continued. She had heard I would speak here, and she wanted her words read to the world. He held the paper close and began reading. Dear world leaders, we are not animals. We are children. Please don't forget us. If you sit in soft chairs, please think of our dry floor. If you drink clean water, please remember my mother is still searching for it. Please, see us. Hear us. By the end, several delegates were wiping away tears. Even seasoned politicians had to lower their eyes. It wasn't just a letter. It was a wound. And Ibrahim Traoré had just ripped it open for the world to finally see. Silence. Only the faint hum of cameras. Then, a single tear dropped onto the wooden desk in front of Traoré. It wasn't his. It came from a diplomat seated behind him. But the moment broke something in the room. One by one, people began looking at Trump, his face still hard but his fingers now trembling ever so slightly. Then Traoré walked slowly toward Trump's table. You could hear a pin drop. Security froze, unsure what to expect. But Traoré did not raise his voice. He didn't point. He didn't accuse. He simply placed Aminata's letter on Trump's desk. Then said softly, "You don't have to read it now, but one day, you will want to know what hope sounded like before it died." Trump didn't move. His face was unreadable, but his hand slowly reached for the letter. The room held its breath. He looked at it, just for a second, and then quickly put it beneath his folder. But that second was enough. Because for the first time in years, Donald Trump looked unsure. And the man standing before him was no longer just a president. He was a mirror. It started with a sniffle, then a shaky breath. Suddenly, one of the delegates, an older man from a European country, stood up and began to weep openly. He didn't try to hide it. He didn't care about cameras. "I helped write those sanctions," he said aloud, voice cracking. "We thought we were protecting something, but we destroyed lives." The room turned toward him. He looked directly at Traoré. "Forgive me. I never thought I'd live to say that." And then, like a wave breaking free, others began standing up too. A woman from Canada, a representative from Latin America. One by one, they rose in silence, tears in their eyes. It wasn't just about Trump anymore. It was about every country that had turned a blind eye to pain they never had to feel. Traoré didn't raise his hands. He didn't demand anything. He just stood there, quiet, tall, unmoved, and dignified. And somehow, in that stillness, he moved the entire world. What happened next would bring every viewer to tears, and every leader to a crossroads they could no longer avoid. As the emotional wave calmed, Traoré did something no one expected. He reached to his chest and slowly removed his military medal. The gold glinted under the UN lights. "This medal was given to me for bravery," he said softly, holding it up. "But bravery isn't being shot at. Bravery is burying your brother and walking back to fight the next day." The room froze. He looked down at the medal in his palm. "My younger brother died carrying grain across a broken road. A drone strike meant for rebels hit his cart. They said it was a mistake." Traoré paused. His hand shook slightly. "There were no rebels that day. Just him. Just a bag of food." His voice cracked now, just for a second. "So when I speak of justice, I'm not speaking politics. I'm speaking grief." Some delegates looked stunned. Others looked ashamed. Even those who'd once doubted him could feel it. This man didn't come to make a speech. He came to carry every grave that was never acknowledged. And suddenly, that room didn't feel so powerful anymore. Right after Traoré stepped back from the microphone, an American journalist stood up from the press box. Her voice rang out, loud, sharp. "Captain Traoré, how do you respond to critics who say you're just playing the victim?" The room tensed. A few murmured in disbelief. The reporter's tone was cold, dismissive, challenging. Traoré turned slowly. His face was calm, but his eyes, they were full of something deeper, not anger, but hurt. "Victim?" he repeated. "Let me show you something." He took a folded paper from his folder again. "This is a photo of a school in my village, or what's left of it." He held it high. A crumbling mud wall, a chalkboard hanging from string, no roof. "We don't need pity. We don't need lectures. We need fairness." He looked at the journalist again. "If telling the truth makes you uncomfortable, then maybe it's not me playing the victim. Maybe it's the world playing blind." That sentence hit hard. Even the journalist lowered her mic, visibly shaken. Because sometimes truth doesn't shout. It stings quietly. And this one
stung deep. Suddenly, the main UN screen behind Traoré flickered on. The tech team didn't expect it. Someone had queued a file he had given them earlier. He looked at the screen. Play it. What followed was a 2-minute silent video. No music, no voiceover, just raw footage. A child in Burkina Faso walking barefoot through cracked dry dirt, carrying a jerry can, flies in the air, no shoes, no school bag. Then, she stumbles, falls. The camera stays there. She doesn't get up right away. The silence in the UN room became unbearable. People shifted. Some looked away. Others simply cried. And then, the final frame appeared. Her name was Mariam. She was 7. She died of dehydration 2 hours after this video was taken. Gasps. Even Trump blinked repeatedly, jaw tight. Traoré didn't speak. He didn't need to. That video said everything. What followed was not applause. It was something deeper. Respect. People didn't clap. They stood in silence, tears streaming, as if mourning someone they never knew, but now could never forget. And this was just the beginning.
As the silence lingered after Mariam's video, a slow, scraping sound echoed in the chamber. A delegate stood up. He was from Europe, gray hair, sharp suit, trembling hands. "Mr. President," he said, voice quivering, "I must speak, not as a diplomat, but as a father." All eyes turned. "When I was posted in West Africa 20 years ago, I signed off on a mining deal. I thought it was just business. We took the land, displaced entire villages. I never looked back." He paused. The room held its breath. "But when I saw that little girl, Mariam, I saw my own granddaughter." Tears rolled freely now. "I don't want to be remembered as the man who shook hands with power, but ignored the hands of the dying." He turned to Traoré. "I'm sorry. I failed your people." The room was frozen. It wasn't in the script, but it was real, and it began to unravel the pride so many had hidden behind. Suddenly, this wasn't just a meeting. It was a reckoning. And Traoré's silence, it was louder than thunder. Outside the UN, the story was erupting. The clip of Trump refusing to sit near Traoré had already passed 12 million views. But it was what came after. Traoré's stand, the little girl's video, the European delegate's tearful confession that set the world on fire. On TikTok, users stitched Traoré's speech with footage of African children dancing. Instagram was flooded with quotes from his speech written over sunsets and African landscapes. Twitter was ablaze with the hashtag #StandWithTraoré. Even CNN, BBC, and Al Jazeera interrupted regular broadcasts, but what shocked the world most was a clip captured by an unnoticed side camera. It showed Trump holding Aminata's letter, staring at it for nearly a minute in silence. He didn't say a word. He just sat there, breathing heavily, tapping his finger on the edge of the paper. People began asking, is this the moment he finally listened? Can one man's truth break even a stone heart? And for the first time in years, people weren't divided by politics. They were united by pain, and drawn to a man who had said less but meant more than anyone else in the room. Traoré stepped back to the mic, but this time he didn't raise his voice. He whispered, "When I return home, I return to people who will still sleep without electricity, who will still fetch water in the dark. But I carry something more than their suffering now. I carry your eyes. You saw us." He turned, looking at Trump again. "Some may hate me for standing, but I didn't come here to be liked. I came here to be heard." He looked at the leaders, then at the youth watching online. To the young girl in South Africa, the boy in Haiti, the orphan in Syria, the child in Gaza, the farmer in Peru, "You are not invisible." His voice broke. "They may not invite you to these rooms, but they can no longer pretend you don't exist.
He took a final breath, then placed a folded piece of cloth on the podium. "This is the shirt my brother wore the day he died. I bring it here, not as anger, but as a reminder." He walked away, and in that quiet exit, he said more than any speech ever could.
Traoré had just walked away from the podium. The room was frozen. His final words still echoed across the chamber. And then, something shocking happened. Donald Trump stood up. The same man who refused to sit beside Traoré. The same man who hadn't said a word for over an hour. Now. He rose slowly from his chair, all cameras turned. He didn't say anything at first, just held Aminata's letter in his hand. His fingers trembled. His voice, when it came, was shaky. Human. "I judged you before I knew your story," he said. Gasps filled the room. "I was wrong." Even Traoré turned in surprise. "That letter, it reminded me of something I lost a long time ago. My own mother used to say, 'If you ever forget the pain of others, you don't deserve your own blessings.'" His voice cracked. "I don't know if I deserve forgiveness, but today, I listened." Silence. Then, with the world watching, Trump extended his hand, and in that moment, history stopped breathing. Would Traoré take it? Would he forgive? Would he walk away? Everyone held their breath. Captain Ibrahim Traoré looked at Trump's outstretched hand. It trembled slightly. The cameras zoomed in. You could hear people whispering. Journalists frozen. Fingers paused above keyboards. Traoré stood still for a long moment. Then, he stepped forward, and slowly he took the hand, not with joy, not with fear, but with grace, with dignity, with power. The room erupted not in applause, but in a kind of quiet awe. It was not about Trump. It was about what it meant. Two worlds finally facing each other. Two histories colliding, and one man choosing to rise above revenge. Traoré leaned in and whispered, picked up only by the nearest mic. "I didn't come here to win. I came here to wake you up." Trump nodded, eyes glassy. Behind them, the entire hall rose to their feet, not as politicians, but as people. People who had been changed, people who would never see power the same way again. And outside the building, in cities around the world, people watching from phones and screens wept like they knew Aminata themselves. 3 days later, a photo of Traoré and Trump's handshake circled the globe. But what truly touched hearts was a new school being built in Burkina Faso, named after Aminata. Donations poured in from over 60 countries, not just governments, but people, mothers, students, farmers, truck drivers, everyone who had felt something shift that day. Traoré gave one last speech before flying home. "This wasn't about me. This was about a little girl who never got to speak in this room. But because of you, her voice was heard." He held up her letter once more. "Let us not wait until the next child dies to care." Then he paused and smiled for the first time that week. "You may forget my name, but if you remember hers, we've already won. If this story touched your heart, if it made you cry, if it made you think, drop a comment below with one word: seen. Like this video if you believe little voices deserve to be heard.